Please
Yeah.
pop up.
Okay, I see it.
The recordings in the chat, it might be a couple of entries up.
Okay.
Here, I'll put it in there again just in case.
Great. Okay, this meeting may involve the remote participation by members, either by telephone or other electronic means, due to the local public health emergency novel coronavirus pandemic, pursuant to the provisions of Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021. There we go. We're all official. So, today have few bullet points, and Alyssa is running late because she has a prior commitment. So we're gonna move her on the LIMS number 4 until she can make it. So let's just start with the Hennepin Downtown Tactile Edge, which is great timing because if you don't know, the doodle poll is out in your inbox. I think like 13, 14 people have already replied, and it seems like the winner so far is, I think, 3 to 4 on the 17th. So appreciate if you can get in your responses tomorrow. So if there's anything happening and people are like, yeah, we want to do it on the 4th, then I need to know really soon. Okay, thanks. And who's here for speaking on the?
Hi, so I'm Katie White. I'm a transportation planner in TPP, and I'll let Amy introduce herself too.
Hi, Amy Morgan, Associate Transportation Planner with TPP.
So, Amy, sorry, Bree.
Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah. Amy's going to drive the screen share, and I'll do a little talking, and then she'll fill in whatever gaps I miss. So Amy and I are here today because we're.
Sorry, Katie. Before we start, do you guys want me to zoom in a little bit, or is this good?
Sure. Zoom. Yeah, a couple times. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Katie.
Also, people have the ability to zoom in on your own device as well.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Cool. That actually looks better for me too. Thanks. So we're here today to talk about the Hennepin downtown section. This is the part of town that is in various stages of active construction. The southern part of it is tidying up. I think they're just putting down paint now, but most of it was completed last year. And then, of course, the remainder of Hennepin downtown is going to take another couple of years to finish. But we're here today to talk specifically about a new treatment that has been or is being installed right now in Hennepin downtown. And we'd like your feedback on it because some of our 2022 construction projects and actually are pending this, might be including this tactile edge feature. And we want feedback now so that it can inform what we do with this in 2022. So Amy scrolled down a little bit and she's showing you a picture of what the tactile edge looks like. Basically, this is a physical, it's kind of a barrier because it is 3-dimensional. It's mostly visual, but it's meant to delineate the space between the off-street protected bicycle facility and then also your traditional sidewalk space on Hennepin Avenue. And so there's a picture there. You know, it's a little bit raised off the ground a bit, so it's detectable by people who are using mobility aids or canes. It's sort of directional so that it lets folks know which way they should be traveling, you know, along kind of thing instead of crossing that barrier in a perpendicular fashion. And so this was intended as our first treatment, and you know, we came through the BAC and QAC to ask about what it should look like when it was installed. But now it's here, and so we're looking for feedback. I know a lot of people might not have been downtown recently, but this is something where if you are downtown over the next several weeks and think about it, and you're along Hennepin Avenue, you know, you can shoot us an email within the next several weeks and let us know what you think. We're evaluating this from a couple of different angles, one of which is winter maintenance. We're having this conversation internally about, how do plows operate on this treatment? Does the material hold up? Those kinds of conversations that are maintenance related, internal to public works. But of course, if you experience this facility in the winter too and have feedback on how it performed in the winter, we'd love to hear about it. But in general, given this committee, we're just wondering what your thoughts are for how it's been deployed, how useful you think it is, and if we should be using this exact treatment or something similar, a little different in the future. So that's the very brief overview. Amy, I'm wondering if there's something that you recommend we go into a little bit more depth on, or you can take questions from the group on an area where they'd like more information.
Yeah, I think that was a good overview, and just opening up to discussion if people have any other questions. It's good. Dan, it looks like you have your hand raised.
Yeah, is this down now and from where to where? And the second part is, what are the materials? It looks like I don't know what type of material, but it looks like there's a bunch of tacks that hold it down if I'm looking at your photograph.
Yeah, right now it's most obvious to find between 8th and 9th, right in front of the Orpheum Theater. And actually, we were really looking forward to seeing it in action this summer. Hamilton was supposed to come this August, and so we wanted to see, does it actually separate bikes and peds during Hamilton? Of course, Hamilton got postponed, so we're not going to be able to check that out. And so the red material, or sort of the rust color material that you see, is a composite. It's not made of cast iron, and it is held down essentially with screws. And we have been having that conversation with maintenance about how well the composite material holds up and how well the screws hold up. But if you have feedback on that, also interested in hearing it.
Phil?
Yeah, I'm curious as to the cost of putting in a strip compared to the total facility. Are we talking a trivial cost, a noticeable cost? What have you found in terms of pricing and installed costs?
I don't know that I've seen a number on cost for a linear foot, Amy. Have you seen a number? No. So I'd say it's not even like 5% of the project cost. I wouldn't say. Reconstructions are very expensive, tens of millions of dollars for this stretch, and so I can't imagine it's anything that's incredible. It's not a deal breaker cost, I would say.
Yeah. Okay.
Chris, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just in case. So Bree was talking about a doodle poll earlier. I'm not sure if you all know what that's for, but basically the BAC is going to get out and take a ride together and check this out. And that'll be coming up within like the next week or two. That doodle poll's active now, but just so you know, there'll be a little more hands-on experience and feedback coming from that.
Oh, that's great. I wasn't sure if she was talking about like kind of into the south section and just like had it triggered in memory. I'm glad you're able to set that up and send out that email. That's really terrific. Thanks.
Yeah, something fun. We're all kind of keen to meet in real life.
Yeah, I think everyone's sort of starved for that.
Okay, Janice?
No, I was just going to add kind of onto what Chris says, that it's not really easy to give you feedback from looking at a picture. So I'm hoping that you're not expecting feedback right now, but just sort of an invitation for the future, because I guess we can try to make sure we look at it in the next week or two and then give you some more feedback.
Yeah, it's certainly not incredibly time sensitive. We're looking, as I said, we're looking to inform our 2022 construction projects. So we need to make a recommendation internally probably by the fall. So having feedback in general, in the first half of summer is useful to us. So thanks.
Okay, and I have a question. So I am used to seeing this treatment in other countries, and it is more for people with disabilities and as a wayfinding tool for them. And I was just wondering, it seems like it's doing multiple things that you want it to do, and it'll be interesting to see how it is in real life, but how did you envision it functioning for folks? Because is it like a barrier and or a wayfinding, or yeah?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, we did have a meeting with MACAPOD, the BAC-PAC equivalent for people with disabilities for the city. And I think we might try to get a similar sort of field visit set up to get their feedback, you know, looking and experiencing it. I think that on a corridor like Hennepin, where there is so much volume, I think that the separation between bikes and peds has got to be probably 50% of the work here, just because of theater traffic and other entertainment and the bars and everything. But I do think that as part of a barrier, it serves that important tool for people with disabilities. And so we want to make sure that it is actually helpful for people with disabilities and get their feedback. But we don't want people who are confused by the tool to be crossing it and walking into the bike lane when they don't intend to. And so that's why I think that the barrier piece is pretty important.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just wondering, like with the cane sweep being quite wide, like if a person's walking on it, I'll see it when I see it, but well, like a bicyclist or something like that. So.
Right, absolutely. And I do think that the Hennepin segment gets a little narrow in some spots. I mean, obviously Hennepin has a wider pedestrian space than most other streets in the city. I think there might be a pinch point or two on the east side. So yeah, that's something to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, what's the, two questions, what's the width of it? And then if this has been up since last winter, I think you said, and it's on the west side of Hennepin between 8th and 9th, what is it like in the wintertime when you get some snowpack and, you know, it's cold? Is it, you know, what does it feel like compared to the cement next to it?
Sure. So I think it's 12 inches wide. And you know, that picture was taken in winter after snowfall, but you know, we had such a light winter this year, only 30 inches of snow, and usually closer to 80. And this snowfall where I pictured it was more almost slushy. We weren't, it depends on the maintenance. We were told that the brush roller snow clearance devices do much better with this treatment than a hard blade, because it's easier to get in those crevices with a brush roller. And because of the maintenance agreements on Hennepin Avenue and how they're different from Nicollet, each building uses a different piece of machinery, and the city doesn't do a uniform clearing on Hennepin, so it could be variable. So that's something to think about and look at. And I should clarify, it's on both, the treatment is on both sides of Hennepin Avenue. I was just referencing the pedestrian side of one of them, but you should be able to see it on both sides of the street. Janice, did you have another question?
Yeah, I just thought of another question. How would it compare to having a curb? Because the thing about a curb would be there'd be no question that people understand what a curb is. And so could you compare it in terms of what was the logic in choosing it over a curb and relative cost?
Okay, I wasn't with the city when the decision was made to go with this. You know, the curb is 8 inches. This is less than an inch in height. So it's a pretty significant difference from a curb. I think one of the benefits to something that is lower profile like this is, you know, when you have an off-street bike facility, and Matthew or Chris can correct my numbers if I'm wrong, you need a certain amount of space that isn't the bike lane as a clear zone, so that if you accidentally get off the bike lane, you're not going to crash into a wall. You know, you can't have the retaining wall right up against the bike lane. And so this way you have that clear zone where if the bicyclist has to get off the designated facility for some reason, you're going to roll over the tactile edge. You're not going to run into a curb and really injure yourself. So you have a little bit of space to play with, even though we don't intend you to, we want you to stay on the bike lane. So I think that that's a big difference between having a curb separated and having a tactile edge.
Okay. Any other questions?
Have there been other ideas explored as far as besides this one? In other words, maybe engraving the concrete or adding a different brick surface in? I don't know, but has anything else been explored or considered?
Amy, have you done more of the reading of the history before, when this treatment was chosen several years ago? I don't want to summarize it. I know that was explored, and so I don't want to summarize it poorly if Amy knows it better than I do.
Yeah, I can try to jump in, and Matthew might be able to help answer some questions too. I think the big deciding factor to go with this is that it was was approved under ADA guidance to be a tactile directional strip versus pavers or some sort of engraving isn't necessarily ADA compliant, so it doesn't necessarily do the same thing. Matthew, I know you're involved a bit in that process. Do you have some more clarity on that?
I think that's right, and I'll just add, Janice and Bree and others are like really spot on with the questions and observations. I think it's very challenging to find something that works for the purpose, and so we've done stamped concrete and things like that, and that provides just a visual buffer, not a tactile. And then like a curb, Janice, like you said, like that would be very clear, that it's a barrier separating something, but it's also like it's not what we want. We want it to be flush, like Katie said, with a reaction. So there's very few choices. And so I think that's where we landed on this type of treatment, which might be able to thread that needle. And so yeah, like Amy said, it's an ADA like sort of approved treatment. And I'll just say the other way to do this is to just have like boulevard, like so even like more space, right? So like just have like a lot more space, have like grass and trees and benches and things like that. I mean, that could be something else, but or I'm thinking, well, anyway, I was thinking of a different example, but I forgot. So that's like another way to do it, but in really constrained areas where we do want the ped next to the bike, like directly, this might be a good answer.
Okay. Let's see. Any other last questions? And Katie and Amy, do you have like specific things or places where you want us to be particularly observant when we do our tour?
No, I don't think so. I think, yeah, I recommend like go biking over it a couple of times, like see what the experience is like to bike over it, and your level of comfort next to the street and level of comfort next to the pedestrian space would be interesting to hear. Like Matthew said, this is important in constrained environments, so we are getting closer to people on all edges, but we want you to be able to feel comfortable biking alongside, the tactile edge here.
Thanks, you two. Okay. Next up on the agenda was Alyssa's Complete Streets Policy Update. However, she is not ready yet. So we can go into the future 5E discussion topics. And What? Oh, sorry. I have a lot of people talking in my side yard, and this is what happens when you live in Minneapolis. But yeah, so I know Heather had some, and my big push, like based on the survey, it seemed like a lot of people were unsure about kind of like our role as BAC members. And I thought that would be a good place to start to just have Chris and Matthew chat like how it has been in the past, how it is now, and then we can have questions and comments about what we want in the future as well. So, yeah.
Should I jump in, Bree?
Go
Say a
for it.
few things. Okay, cool. Yeah, so we've just been talking about like what's the focus of the 5E group, and there have been a lot of questions, and obviously we've got a good amount of new members, which is awesome. But that means that like there's some potentially like some institutional knowledge that like we can work towards transferring over. So I'll just throw out like a couple things of like Matthew and I are always like really wary of just like one thing that we don't like to do is just being like, hey, person in public works, this is your job, come talk to the BAC. Like, even though we do get those requests from members, which I understand where those come from, we try to focus it more on like active work that's coming through, where there's already kind of like an engagement plan and folks are thinking about how to like bring it through the BAC PAC. So that's like one piece of like just the work that we're doing as a department that we then bring through. But then there's also kind of this piece of getting kind of everybody on the same page, and especially new members up to speed on what we've been doing over the last couple of years. And obviously the transportation action plan is a really big thing, and there's a lot of different subjects. So one idea that Heather and Bree and I were chatting about was that if someone wanted to, like a member wanted to like take one chapter for a day or something like that, like be like, hey, I'm gonna dig into the bicycle section, and then like one of you would do a report out, and we could have a little discussion about like what it means, what the different timelines for things are, how the BAC might kind of like influence that, or because ultimately the transportation action plan is not funding constrained, and so there are going to be choices inevitably of like where we prioritize things and how we do that. So that was one idea, and then I think Bree and Heather were just kind of asking Matthew and I to kind of informally answer any questions that folks might have now about the direction for the 5E, and so I'm also happy to just kind of take questions now if people have any, and I know they've been kind of cropping up over the last few months, but if there's anything you have right now, happy to chat about it.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I mean, just piecing together from the meetings, I'm really interested in like how public works and how kind of not like detail, you know, this is like you go from A to B, but like, you know, it's like what power does the BAC have in relation to public works, and what tactics work and might not be as effective while working with public works and other players at the city, just to get a better understanding of kind of like the challenges you may have as staff. So we have a better understanding of like, I mean, we're always going to ask and demand for, you know, probably more than you're able to give us. So it would be nice just to kind of understand. And I think you two have been really good at like explaining it when it comes up, what those constraints are. So go for it.
I saw you unmuted, Matthew. Did you want to say something, or should I?
You can start. I'm
Sure.
ready.
So, yeah, the question of like where is the BAC's power, and like what is the BAC's power does come up a good amount, and I can give you my take on it, and I also totally agree, Bree, that like you all have every right to like be pushing the boundaries on that, and like sometimes your resolutions are meant to do that, sometimes it's just like how we change the function of these meetings. So I appreciate that lens, but um I would say like the most obvious power that I think Matthew's done a lot to kind of solidify and institutionalize, as well as other people before Matthew. But the engineering subcommittees is like it's just pretty straightforward and clear. Not to say there's not a lot of stuff to learn about like how to comment, and like the engineering stuff there can definitely be a learning curve. So not downplaying that, but it's just like projects come at 0% and they come at 30%, and that's really the BAC's chance to influence those capital projects. Now, with that said, like in the power behind that is the ability to create a resolution directed towards public works or the council, and there's no like regulatory power behind that. So those resolutions, I mean, we've had some conversations, I think, in these committees and in the executive committee about like how do we know how successful like the BAC or the PAC are being with resolutions and things like that. So that's one piece that always comes up. But and then the it's a little bit of a weird time because so many people did switch over, but like the BAC was very involved in the transportation action plan, and that very much set a direction for a lot of kind of planning priorities as well as some capital priorities. So that's what we look to. And actually there'll be some interesting stuff that I think will be made public. I don't know exactly when, but basically we're putting together a lot of stuff around tracking what's being completed in the transportation action plan. And so I think that's something that like as we dig into that more, this group can take a look at that and kind of see what we're focusing on, and if you have any comments.
I'll add a little bit. I definitely think, and something that I try to tell all new folks when they come on is that the resolution, the actual written past resolution, is probably one of the most powerful tools, particularly because that goes directly to the council members. And then I would say the discussion at the engineering committees in a reactive way to the projects, like Chris said, is really important, especially if it's like very specific and like measured, and also if there's some consistency across other advocates like our streets and residents in the area. Like if there's like collective power in like a voice, that's the same, that's really helpful. And then also I think of measured in years, pushing on public works to change like the bigger systems is also really, really important and valuable. And I think that can often be one of the most frustrating things that I've observed with members is like if you may not feel like change is happening right away, but like that patient persistence over a set of years. And just like Vision Zero, I think for a capital program is a really good example of that, in my opinion. Both the PAC and BAC over a period of years, like was out in front of us, I would say, in that aspect of quick build, temporary material treatments on high injury streets. You all were telling us that for years. Eventually, we came along, did made the declaration for Vision Zero, and did the crash study and turned it into an action plan, and then we worked to develop a budget in the CIP for it. So those are like a couple different ways. Reactive, that's really important, and then proactive, patient over a period of years is also helpful. And then finally, I think it's also I'm amused by the question of you all asking staff how you can push us, because it's like, in a way, it's like, whether we agree with it or not is one thing, but you all can push us in ways that we're not comfortable with as well. I'll just say that. Janice. Okay.
Well, okay. As you know, I've been a member for a little over 10 years. And what I can say is when I joined the BAC 10 years ago, we didn't have a bike ped coordinator. So when you're asking what kind of effect we can have, and in fact, Matthew's our second bike ped coordinator. So where there was no bike ped coordinator. The other thing that was 10 years ago completely different would be that a street had been, a city would start paving a street. And this is, I don't think the BAC can take credit for this, but the city would start paving a street and we'd say, oh, wait a second, you didn't ask for input. So this whole issue of getting input is really a completely new thing in terms of the last 10 years. 10 years ago, the city wasn't asking anybody for input before they paved a street or did not put in a bike lane. So those kinds of things have changed. And 10 years is not really a long period of time. But I'd say Robin has been a member since before there was a BAC. And so really, he's a good person if you ever have questions about what, things used to be like. And Georgiana was also a member before I joined.
Well, thanks so much, Janice. And yeah, this is a discussion. It's not just, Chris and Matthew presenting things. So yeah, if I'm brand new, there's so many brand new folks, but yeah, I really appreciate seeing, those changes. And yeah, I remember when the new bicycles are was instituted, and it was a really big deal. And so it was really great. Okay, Phil.
Well, this discussion brings to my mind sort of two of these sort of proactive, longer term sort of issues, topics that we could work on in terms of policy. And one of them, which did come up in the 3Es or the 5Es survey, was public works. It feels like when we hear about projects, we get a good description of what was the public outreach and engagement. But for the BAC to be proactive on what sort of metrics are we looking for? What do we feel would be a reasonable or minimum level of sort of feedback, public engagement? I think that would be one sort of thing that BAC would be useful on. The other thing is I've been thinking back to the CIP presentation. We look at 5 years. We've looked at 1 year operations budget, and I've just sort of been noodling, and I'll when I get around to it, I'll send out something. But I'm sort of thinking for your average person, or really for any of us, what we really want to know, I think Alyssa made the point, what we really want to know is that in a given year, and I know it's complex how you slice this, but really in any given year, and then looking at 2 or 3 years in the future, are we really planning to spend more money on bike walk transit? Or are we really planning to spend more money on sort of car infrastructure only? And how you define and how you split it, how you count it is not trivial. And it's done a few different ways, but at least one way is that we know there are capital dollars, there are operation dollars, there's pure city money, there's money coming from the outside. But I feel like we would benefit by talking and coming up with a unified way to talk about what's the spend, bike walk transit, basis cars, and what's it planned to be next year, and the next year, and the next year. And we have to look at more than the CIP. So that would be an example of the sort of thing. It feels like 5Es, we can talk about complex work would require some staff work too, but that's sort of what I think about when I think about 5Es here.
I'll just say it's definitely my goal this year to start that like CIP and just general budgeting conversation earlier, and want to work with Bree and Heather to figure out what that is. But we have already kind of spoken about that, so that makes a lot of sense to me what you just said, Phil, in terms of just like really getting the whole BAC on the same page of like the collective vision that you want to ask for how we spend our money, basically, is kind of what I hear you saying, and doing that like over time and like into the future. And then also the first one, what was it again? I had a reaction to that too. What was your first point?
Oh, it was the we talked about public works does engagement, sort of the how and the what, sort of metrics, minimal.
Yeah. Yeah, we're actually actively working on that through our racial equity framework, which has yet to come to the BAC, but it will. So that's also very timely too. I know, yeah, like if you want to start having those conversations about that sort of thing, I think that'll be a really good place to kind of plug that in.
Nice. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think for the BAC 5Es subcommittee, I kind of envision us figuring out short-term and long-term goals. So, you know, like have the insight from Chris and Matthew on what a reasonable timeline would be on certain things. And so we just kind of have at least like an ongoing list. So we either things don't drop off, or, you know, we can always push things forward, which oftentimes happens. But I feel like sometimes we get really wrapped up in things and we might not have time for everything, but just to kind of keep things on the radar. And I think this is part of the conversation, right? Like things are popping up and, you know, might need attention sooner than later. And then, but we're continuously working on, you know, like Phil said, engagement and the budgeting process. And yeah, I really like that idea of, so because like, especially, you know, in the engineering meeting, there's a lot of projects coming at them, and that's awesome, and that's what we want. However, then we don't have those deeper discussions on, like, you know, even this tactile project, it seems like a very small part of it, but with ADA and then bicycling, and, you know, we all know that there's so many different ways that streets can be designed, and it's not, it flows from like super curbs to like no anything anywhere, and it's just a free-for-all, and sometimes that works really well and sometimes it doesn't in places. And yeah, just to kind of move that forward. So I'm glad the city's experimenting. I, like the nerd that I am, I wish that like you could bring us and be like, here are all the different types of things, and we can all like bike over them all in one, like, you know, parking lot, I guess. But I know that's not possible. But yeah, any other thoughts about, you know, are people receptive for, you know, breaking down the tap and taking apart and just kind of do a summary, and then also, you know, either facilitate a conversation or work with me and Heather and Chris to, you know, kind of have some talking points. Because yeah, I think we don't just want a presentation. I'm trying to have this as more of a discussion-based subcommittee, because I don't know, I kind of glaze over once there's a PowerPoint with tiny lots of little words. So so you don't have to do anything like that. It wouldn't be like, oh, here is the tap and the 4 bullet points and all the pictures and things. It's just like, hey, you know, however in depth you want to get into it, and you know, we can provide the link to the tap to discuss that. Can we do this where, like, if you raise your hand, you're interested, and then I'll just jot down people's names, but it's not about like talking? Does that make sense? Okay, let's do it. Raise your hand if you're interested in taking a bit of tap and talking to people about it. Thanks, Heather.
Sure, it would force us all to really look at it, wouldn't it?
It's so big. Okay.
Great technique.
Okay, so I got me, Heather, Maya, Bill. Okay.
And Bree, just quickly, so we also had spoken that like maybe we don't need to do this for all 7 chapters of the TAP. So like more likely we would just be like doing like the bike section, maybe the ped section, and then if like I don't know if there's one other or however you want to do it, but just throwing that out there.
I think the operations one and technology, I think those would be pretty applicable as well, in my opinion.
Okay.
And it's easy, like it's easy to use the online version and like, you know, just click on each like topic, and the strategies are just so easy to see, you know, so you can kind of, it's not like flipping through a PDF or something. It's really navigable.
Yeah, there's like a bicycling spot. So how about, you know, Heather, Chris, and I, we kind of break it down and then email the folks that said that they'd be interested, and then, you know, you can choose what is interesting to you, because I don't want it to be like, oh no, I have to talk about this that I have no interest in. So yeah, and if folks like already have perused the TAP website, just let us know if you're interested in a specific bit for sure. So, and the website is go.minneapolismn.gov. Not too bad. Good job, City of Minneapolis. It's easy to remember. Cool. Yeah, I mean, my big concern, and I think a lot of our concern, is because TAP isn't connected to any dollars. It's like this wonderful document that is, in my mind, a bit more aspirational than practical in this time with funding. And how do we connect that? I think Alyssa does a really great job of connecting the city's goals with TAP and the other policies that are being put into place, but then how is it connected to actual funding dollars to get it done? And how we can push that either through CIP or other budgeting processes. I know a big thing that we were, Alyssa mentioned was, oh, what is that? The transparency in the budget.
Participatory budgeting.
Yeah.
Alyssa likes, yeah.
Yeah.
That.
So, I mean, that could be like a long term, like, whoa, of just, you know, sharing that we would like citizens to be able to participate in where our money's going. So, okay. So, I know, like, when we were talking about strategic planning, we talked about like relationships with folks, and I think, you know, it's like reach out to your council member would be a really great thing to do. But I also am kind of confused of like who the players are that are like the decision makers, and, you know, are they available for the public to, you know, email or, you know, maybe, you know, plan a BAC bike ride with those folks. I know council members do that for like bike to work day and things like that. That's kind of more like FaceTime, so they can kind of see and we can say, yay, way to go, you're doing great, or or hey, you can do a better job, and like, you know, show them maybe opportunities that there are in the city. Any thoughts on that, Chris and Matthew?
We have had like the mayor join us for bike to work rides before, and Councilmember Reich. I think we had a bunch. So Matthew does a lot of that organizing actually for like bike to work week and month, and so that's some of the time where that sort of thing happens. I think more than others.
I'm trying to think if I have anything to add to that. And I don't think I do. I'm wrestling with the question of like who are the key players and the the decision makers. We could talk through that, just like our structure of leadership and things like that. But yeah, I'm not sure what else on that topic, I guess.
Okay.
Like, do you want to know kind of the structure of public works or?
I mean, I think how it relates to at least bicycling in the BAC, because I know public works is a huge department, wastewater, it does everything. It makes so the city function. Yeah.
For the most part, I think that it's staff level public works folks that are interacting directly with the BAC, PAC. That's not always true. There has been cases in the past where like the deputy director was the lead on a very specific kind of like study and thing. And so they've come, but typically it's going to be staff, and more often than not, staff from our planning and programming division than anywhere else, though that also kind of depends. And staff from our engineering groups comes for the engineering meetings as well. But especially because like Matthew and I and Millicent are housed in the planning and programming group, that's kind of like the home for this committee in many ways. So that's where a lot of that interface happens.
Yeah, so it's almost like a process answer, and I don't know if that's the right answer, but you all typically, like Chris just said, interact with the project manager, and then ultimately Public Works as an agency makes certain decisions, and then often, there's obviously decisions that Public Works can make like solely, but then often like the big decisions go through a council process of some sort. And it kind of just depends. So we often seek council approval on layouts, so like big reconstruction, formal approval. And then if there's if there's smaller projects, like it's just a restriping and something that's changing with the use, there's a more informal approval from city council. So that kind of varies. It's sometimes hard to like pinpoint the person in Public Works that's making the decision. It's as opposed to like the department itself through the structure of the project manager. So I don't know if that's helpful or just still confusing. I guess I'll just ask. Because I mean I understand like in a very casual way, like yeah, sometimes it's hard to know like who's the person that makes the final decision. It's like sometimes it's not that simple. Like there is it is sometimes collective between divisions, and I don't know. I don't know if I'm helping.
It is complicated, right?
Yeah.
There is confusion.
Sure. But what I think that the easiest way, or at least I think the most appropriate, is that we want the project manager on projects to be seen as the face of the project publicly, and so that part I think is clear to me, and maybe the best way to the best place to leave it, and that often the big decisions like policies, plans, like project approval go through city council with a form of a recommendation from Public Works.
And maybe this will be helpful, maybe not, but like, so for the transportation action plan, for example, like Kathleen, who's Matthew's supervisor in our division, was the project manager for that, and so was the face at the BAC for all of that, and for all engagement ultimately. And we had a lot of people working on that, but then there were several different types of like working groups and steering committees with division directors and all the way up to like Robin when she was here at the time, and different things. So it's kind of like Matthew said, like more that like process involving kind of all those different levels sort of thing. So just to give one example of how that's worked.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I kind of think back to Phil when he was talking about engagement, and I have noticed that it's not consistent from project to project, right? Like with Bryant, it seemed like the engagement and outreach was at a higher level than, say, 30th in Chicago. And so I know, that's attached to budget, and I'm assuming the budget of the project and things like that, and the resources those project managers have. Is that going to be part of the racial equity package?
Yeah, we've had some conversations about through the racial equity framework, trying to help us decide what level of engagement different types of projects should require. Because like, for example, like the way we moved forward with Vision Zero was not that we go out on every single corner and ask the people who live right there, like, are you okay with this? It was like we sold that as a package plan. We know where the high injury streets are, and mostly, for the most part, we just implemented it with kind of a higher level engagement approach of just inform. There are other projects like 38th in Chicago or like Bryant where it's going to be more than just informing people about what's happening. It's going to be like actual engagement, and even that like has a whole sliding scale. So I do think that's something that we aim to address with the racial equity framework and figuring out, like, I don't know, maybe for median projects that don't really impact too much of anything, like we don't need to be even talking to the BAC because it's just going to follow the street design guide specifically, and like that is what it is or something like that. But also I will just say, I know there's just a lot of thoughts around 38th in Chicago, and I haven't been super involved in that, but in some ways we, at least for a time, we're doing more engagement, I think, than was spent on Bryant Avenue. We had two staff members that were out there every single day for quite a while, just interfacing with community, and that project is kind of a different beast because of the political nature and just what it means to the city. So I won't like go into anything more just because I haven't been a part of it, but just one thing that comes to mind. Alexander Cato and Ethan Foley did a lot of work on that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, bye Maya. Yeah, I mean, does anyone else have any thoughts or comments or discussion or questions that you'd like to discuss right now? And I mean, this is an ongoing conversation, like I've said in the past. Like, I'm glad that it's spurring some folks to, think about what they individually want to prioritize as well, and how they envision this subcommittee. But yeah, I like this idea of like having thoughtful conversations and giving people time. We did an excellent job at the all BAC committee meeting, but it was just a lot of, not a lot of breathing room. And so I really like that this space gives us that. At the moment, it's not always going to be like this, like we've had in the past. But yeah, I mean, our city has a lot of big issues that I feel like we oftentimes don't get to talk about because we're so on agenda. So I'm hoping this is a space where we can be thoughtful and open with each other, and hopefully imagine better ways, for biking, walking, transit, and also just the processes of how our city works. Yeah, that's kind of like my big idea is like, how can we have a better city to live in for everyone. Okay, so I saw hands up. Where's it? Let's see it. I think it was Dan and Cadence. Yeah, Dan Miller, go ahead.
Yeah, hello. I think that Bryant and Hennepin Avenue most recently are things to really be proud of with the public engagement that happened. I think sometimes public engagement hasn't happened unless there's people concerned about having a bikeway there rather than in an environment where people might actually want a bikeway on that street. And so I think those are two recent examples where I think the public engagement was much more intense than what could have ever gone before the BAC. Remember, if we're doing 0 and 30%, we would have been 4 generations past previous where things are with the Bryant Avenue project. And it is a concern of mine that you can get a project introduction, which is a fact sheet, which you can pull off of the website, hopefully, and then all of a sudden we have a plan that's kind of baked, and you've got very little time to react to that. So most recently, that was a lot of my complaint about 37th Avenue that we talked about last week. And yeah, I think that having that type of engagement equitably happening around the city, 37th Avenue is flyover country for most of you. It's on the edge of the city. It's on the border with Columbia Heights. And it should receive some attention, similar attention to in all districts. And the North Side has gotten engagement because of the community, and it's a different community, and a lot of it was kind of trying to get that feedback and to hear that. But up in Northeast, we've had one project, which has been Johnson Street, the Johnson Street reconstruction, that actually had that kind of public engagement, and where you actually worked through, you heard from different people, and it took a process. And I certainly would like to see us push for that, push for more than a 0 project introduction fact sheet, and here's what we're going to do, where we had some impact, where we could hear back from the project people about what we had suggested and reasons why it couldn't happen or why it could happen. And again, the incident last week is one example that I give. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I think, talking about process is more open with staff as well, because I have felt with the presentations and like the question and answer time, they may feel like on the spot and need to give an answer. And I would much rather have folks, and this might not be the case, but it's my feeling that, it's like, okay, I need to answer your question and I will do it best of my ability. But sometimes it's just better to say, I don't know, and we'll get back to you, and having kind of a timeline. So then it doesn't have to be so reactionary when we bring up points. And I don't know how to put that in the process, but that would probably be helpful with what Dan was saying as well. So Cadence.
Yeah, so I appreciate all of the conversation that's happened already, and I definitely like the ideas of each of us who's been appointed maybe having more of a open line of communication with whoever it was that appointed us to our current position. Some of us, that's the direct person, others it's like an agency, so it feels a little bit different. Something that I would really be interested in too, and I don't want this to put more work on you, Chris and Matthew, but best practices, when we have planners come present preliminary designs anywhere from 0% kickoff to 15, 30% design, etc. I personally like to hear about their process, like, oh, we were thinking about a shared use path, but like for X, Y, and Z, this is why we didn't do that. Or we know that a floating bus stop is a design that has worked elsewhere, and that's why we're presenting that in this plan. Like if there could maybe almost be more of an educational piece about maybe different infrastructure types, treatments, facilities, et cetera, like that, maybe that would happen in this committee. I feel like all of us are pretty knowledgeable about different facility trade-offs, benefits, potential like different mode conflicts, but not all of us have an engineering background or a planning background. So I like the idea of knowing more where staff are coming from. Like what is the reasoning? What is the rationale? It's not just like, this is what we've arrived as what we're presenting today, but like this is a little bit more hands-on of like, this is why we chose this design to advance, or why we chose to present this design in this format here. I think what we're going to see over the next 10, 20 years is more people get interested in planning and are more engaged. Like we've had projects take totally different like design recommendations and just scrap them. I mean, I know that this is transit and not bike pedestrian, but like Botno having the alignment just go all the way back to like the drawing board, like that's unprecedented. Like that doesn't happen. The fact that Bryant's had so many iterations on the design has been one, fascinating, exciting, and also kind of hard to keep up with everything that's going on. And then that is sort of my complaint about 38th in Chicago is I just don't know what's going on. Like what I got in the mail is different than what's on the website. And so that's also different than what is in the Public Works video. It's like, it's not clear always if you're just an average resident trying to find the latest design. So like, how can that be better organized? But I think just for like the purposes of our board, like I like the educational piece of it for us, like knowing why this design was advanced. It was a little bit wordy, but that's sort of like how my brain is all the time. I apologize, but I can't escape it. So
Thanks, Nancy. I mean, I think like what I've taken away, like I've only gone to like one, maybe two engineering meetings, is like when they're talking about, even with, you know, our entire BAC committee meetings, it's like, yeah, you should be able to see all that stuff on the website, and you won't need a staffer to just present what is on a website and how we can, you know, be more effective in utilizing our time and getting to those questions and discussion about aspects of the road project. But Chris and Matthew have their hands up.
Do you want to go first, Matthew?
No, you go ahead.
I think these are all great comments and fascinating to a certain extent of like, Cadence, I totally agree. As someone who's staff in the divisions working with these folks, my favorite part of the engineering meetings has always been being able to see what other people are working on, because it's not like, it's often very siloed for like project managers and things like that. And like, I just won't know what's going on. At the same time, then like I'm really interested in all your thoughts on like, I've been telling presenters to like take 10 minutes and say like the most important thing. And like, when you brought that up, the first thing that came to mind is Simon Blensky, who some of you know. He's since gone to Seattle, but he had a really good way of just presenting, and he would do like a lot of like photos of similar types of infrastructure that are in a different part of the city and like that sort of thing. I honestly don't know if we would have been able to fit a Simon Blensky type presentation into our last like 2 or 3 engineering meetings. And so like some of this maybe gets we've been throwing this idea around of like, what's the level of engagement for which types of projects for the BAC? And like, are there maybe ways to free up the time to be able to do that? And even that, like that, I think that's going to be like harder than, I don't know, it's not super straightforward. But so interested in feedback in like, I mean, different project managers handle their websites differently. They do different amounts of open houses. They like it's not super standard, especially depending on what type of project it is like that. And so I think that's good feedback. And again, maybe the racial equity framework is somewhere we can help kind of push that idea forward. And then Bree, you said some stuff that like Matthew and I have given feedback, exactly the feedback that you said to our staff of like you don't always have to have an answer on the spot. Like it's okay to be like, yeah, we'll take that back. We've heard similar things from the PAC too, and so we can keep like I appreciate what you're saying there, and I think there is room for us to kind of keep on trying to do that better. And then the very last thing that I wrote down that maybe is intended to help this sort of thing, and I don't know what it means for the BAC yet, but within the last year, we've changed our engagement strategy. Matthew was actually one of the people kind of working on this, essentially like extending, at least for major reconstruction projects, like extending out a year earlier as like the time where we start engagement. So instead of just like 1 year before it needs to be out for construction bid, like doing an extra year out so that it's not as rushed with the different types of engagement. And I don't know that we've really like fully standardly implemented that yet. Maybe you would say otherwise, Matthew, but but that's another piece of this. And yeah, I think they're all good comments.
So I have a few things. So Chris said a lot of what I was thinking, but I really like buy into this idea that you were bringing up, Bree, of like of being. I think public works staff should feel comfortable sharing how they came to a decision. I think sometimes there's a sense that that decisions need to be decisive, and then defended versus like acknowledging that there could be a variety of ways that the street could look, and they have pros and cons, and it's like I guess just like it's good advice to just be comfortable either not knowing an answer or saying like, yeah, we thought about that and here's where we landed. And it's almost like the way I think of it is sometimes when I see Twitter, bike Twitter, like really like dissecting projects and saying like it should look like this and like no, it should look like this. And I often like smile to myself because I'm like we have those same robust conversations here at the BAC, and like staff have those conversations amongst themselves. And so yeah, just acknowledging that there's a lot of different ways this could look, and not that the way we're going to land on is the only reasonable way. So I don't know, I'll just stop.
I mean, I think just like maybe one presentation, it just felt like it was like a sales pitch.
Right.
And so it's like, and it just felt like folks didn't feel like they could deviate and were more like, yeah, defending like this is the choice.
Right.
And I totally understand, like it's their baby, right? Like
well, and it's also
those processes for so long, and yeah.
and what last thing I'll say is like, BAC is one group, but then there's like business associations and neighborhood associations and like, school contacts. And so like I can see how I sometimes can also understand how like a project manager, if they're going to be going to like, especially if it's like controversial or like, heated feelings, like, they're having like some kind of a boxed up presentation, like I can see being like helpful. But anyway, I'll stop there.
I think it was Phil and then Dan.
Yeah, just quickly, I think, Chris, it was something you said. It made me realize that, we always get a plan view, certainly for an engineering proposed facility, we always get a plan view, an aerial view. Sometimes we don't get a section view. We really always need to see that street view, section view, or really better an axiomatic, sort of, the bird flying at 6 feet, and going down that really is super helpful, and we can all read plan views, but more section views probably are better. That's all.
That's good feedback. I can take that back. I will say that it'd probably be more likely to have a section available once it gets closer to 30%. Just depending on how much a given project is changing or not. But
yeah,
just from like a cost perspective of like continually updating a section that's changing or something like that. But yeah, that's good. That's good feedback.
Okay, Dan.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Phil has to say, and a little bit about just understanding basic right of way and available space I think could happen pretty easily without having to, just to have an understanding of that. And I'll keep pushing back, if we have to do 6 projects in an engineering meeting, that you get a lengthy redux of the project fact sheet and very little time to have feedback or to really understand what's going on, makes it very difficult for us. And that's, again, we've been hit with that for the last several meetings, and we're not doing due diligence. We just aren't. We aren't having a time to investigate. I would advocate highly that these people, if this is going to have to continue, they need to come in at 15% and be able to give us an idea of what's going on. Something between, here we are, we're done now, bye. I just, it's just, I don't think we're doing a good job, and I think that both Bryant and Hennepin are doing well. I think 38th is going to do well too, because of the amount of time that the Public Works has spent with the community and trying to dig out issues. We can't replace those types of hours with a 15-minute review. There's just no way we can keep up with it. I've learned more in this last year of Zoom and Teams to sit in on community meetings that are being sponsored by our planners to really get kind of an understanding, because to see it once and then to react is just not enough time to digest what's going on. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, in the surveys, someone mentioned, I don't know if this was the correct phrasing, but like they're open to homework, right? We're meeting at least twice a month since everyone goes to the full meeting, and they're supposed to do one subcommittee. And I do feel like, to move this conversation along, one thing that comes to mind is that you said like our homework by, within 2 months, meet with your city council rep or member or whoever like designated you to be on the BAC would be something that is actionable and that I'd be willing to do. And I'm not sure what other people's schedules are, but kind of, dig into some of these things that we've been talking about when you have an interest, and then, just bringing it up in conversation like this. Oh, I think I saw someone's hand up and then it went away. Did someone want to put?
Yeah, this is Tyler. I was Bree, you pretty much nailed exactly what I was gonna say about homework and just taking some time before the meetings, each of us to review and I need to do this myself more often, so I'm kind of criticizing myself, is to really review the agendas beforehand, get a handle on those projects, visit those project web pages, and spend a half an hour just to kind of familiarize yourself and build a few questions. Those are things that I've got to work on myself, so I think that's a good idea, the homework piece.
Oh yeah, just like a reminder at the end of like, because it seems like the meetings kind of line up one after another on the week. you know, maybe we add a section at the end of like, hey, at the engineering meeting, this is what is going on, if you want to join. Because I think the agenda is really good to, you know, some folks are just interested in certain regions of the city, and then they could kind of take that. Our subcommittee is a little bit more ambiguous, but yeah, I really like that idea, and yeah, there's just stuff that we can all work on to be better informed and just like ready to go.
I will just say I don't know that I would have all the information ready to be able to like present at the subcommittee or like meeting before the engineering on what's going to be coming up, because we just made a bunch of process changes. That's already been like a lot to make sure that we get those agendas out when we do, which is like a few days in advance. So we can, I just don't want to commit to like having a report out for what the engineering committee is going to be at like that.
Like a report, like if you knew like for sure, like, hey, here are a couple projects that we know for sure is going to be on the agenda, like, and here
Okay.
the links to them, something like that. I just don't know where the website is now with the changeover, so I don't really know how much I can trust it. Can I trust it?
Well, yeah, we could do like a website tutorial. Basically, it's just we've been adding so many different process things that even to just pull the links for the the projects that are coming up is like one more thing in a big thing. But I mean, I think they're up there, and if we want to do a tutorial about how to access those, then that's definitely something that we could spend some time on.
Yeah, we can do that at the next subcommittee meeting.
Cool.
Okay, and Alyssa is here. Welcome, Alyssa. Okay, well, it is 5:19, so we can wrap up this discussion and have Alyssa talk about Complete Streets. Anyone have any last minute comments or questions? Okay, awesome. Okay, Alyssa, take away.
Hey everyone, thanks Bree and Heather and Chris for being flexible with the agenda and my conflict today. I am mostly gonna just kind of give a verbal update and then kind of open things up to the group for discussion about the Complete Streets policy. So as part of the Transportation Action Plan, there was a goal identified somewhere in the Transportation Action Plan that said, we need to update the Complete Streets policy to account for freight, right? As the city is sort of continuing to deal with, we have like these large trucks for freight, right? But there's also all these like small Amazon delivery trucks that are freight. And so there was a recognized need to think about how does our Complete Streets policy relate to this like emerging sort of smaller freight pattern that happens in the city, as well as think about how it relates to some of the city's green infrastructure goals. So starting in the fall, I think the first email I got about this was in September. Starting in the fall, there was a meeting in October, and there has been a series of meetings with key stakeholders. I was invited to be the Bicycle Advisory Committee representative. The Pedestrian Advisory Committee has a representative. A number of different business folks have representatives. There's also a number of members from within Public Works. So Matthew is part of that conversation. There's somebody from like the traffic and engineering folks. I think there's about 20 or so, 25 maybe, folks involved in the conversation. So there's been a series of meetings. We're now approaching meeting number 4, kind of discussing how do we update the Complete Streets policy. So the first few meetings were really about gathering input and information from the key stakeholders who were invited to attend. And then the third group meeting included a draft, a red line draft, and then a clean draft of the Complete Streets policy. So those are the updated Complete Streets policy. So those are the two documents attached, 2 of the 3 documents attached to the committee update in LIMS. I can share screen also. And then there's also a new updated hierarchy graphic. So folks have probably seen the hierarchy graphic before. It's an upside down pyramid. And at the top, sort of the widest part of the pyramid has kind people walking and biking. The second row of the pyramid has, walking and rolling. The second has biking and trans. I should know what the hierarchy is. There's different levels of the hierarchy. Thank you everyone for laughing with me. But basically it says we're going to prioritize in this order: walking, rolling, biking, transit, and then cars, right? So there's also been an update to the graphic, which includes now people walking and rolling on the top level, people biking and using transit and using scooters on the second level. There's like a third level that includes cars and smaller freight, right? Like so those Amazon type delivery trucks. And then at the bottom of the upside down triangle is the big freight, large freight, the semi trucks, and then there's a little car with a P over it to stand for parking. So that's sort of the visual representation of the policy. The policy is about 4 or 5 pages. It's not substantially longer than the 2016 policy, which was when we first passed our Complete Streets policy. And the proposed policy has some good stuff in it, and also some very worrying stuff in it. We definitely could go through it line by line. There are a lot of red line changes that you all can see. I'm not sure that that is the most productive use of our discussion time. I will say there have been a number of folks who support the sustainable transportation perspective, right? So myself, the Pedestrian Advisory Committee Chair, Ash Narayanan from Our Streets is on the committee, as well as folks from Move Minneapolis. And we sort of looked at the policy together and had a couple of high-level thoughts about where the policy is going. And I just wanted to kind of share out some of those discussions and some of those talking points with you all. And I think as a committee, we could decide that a resolution would be appropriate. Before I dive into the specifics, I will say this third meeting where they presented the red line changes was supposed to be the last meeting. That was supposed to be sort of a report out as far as I understood it, and then it was going to go to council. Now we're having one more feedback meeting based on some of the feedback that I and those other stakeholders provided in the last conversation. So there's some potential opportunity for us to influence the policy in a good way, I think, but I would say it is far from certain. Matthew, do you want to dive in before I talk about specifics?
Yeah, I guess my additional observation is that staff heard a lot of information at the last meeting, which is why there's going to be a fourth, like Alyssa said, and that they'll definitely plan on coming back to the PAC-BAC for a review after some of that feedback is incorporated. So I just wanted to double check that last fact that staff will come back to the PAC-BAC prior to going to full council.
Cool, thanks, Matthew. Phil, did you have an immediate thought or question?
Just specifically, I wanted to talk about the term complete streets and also how emergency vehicles were viewed, which I was surprised at. So I can come back later when we get to specifics. Unless you want me to dive in.
Well, I think it is. Thank you for the reminder to take a step back and define what a complete street is and what a complete streets policy is supposed to do. If you want to do that, you're welcome to do that. I can do it as well.
Sure. Well, I guess I was just surprised that, we started to see across Minnesota, in Minnesota cities 6 years ago. Well, it was with North St. Paul, the term complete green streets or living streets. And in adding the green infrastructure, bar on the triangle, awfully good. I guess I was surprised that living streets, since we're also talking about land use and economic vitality, and I was surprised we're still calling this complete streets. That was one thing, and the second thing was that the bias is so counter to, in talking about emergency vehicles, the bias was, well, we might have to sort of not do such a complete street if we're dealing with emergency vehicles, as opposed to the guidance from the International Fire Chiefs Association and the Congress for the New Urbanism, which is that we need to be biased towards smaller fire trucks, and that's happening certainly in several cities on the West Coast. And so I was just surprised. It felt like a very old reference to emergency vehicles as, well, of course we have to defer to the size which is preordained in our emergency vehicles. So those were things that jumped out at me.
Yeah, so that's helpful to hear. I think I will take that step back and just sort of to make sure everybody's on the same page, talk about what a complete streets policy is, and then Dan, if you want to jump in. So the complete streets policy is intended to say our streets we need to have a modal hierarchy within our streets, right? And at the top of the hierarchy should be the most vulnerable users and should be people like walking and rolling, because that's how everybody gets around, whether you use transit, whether you drive, right? You start and you end your trips as a person walking. Transit and biking are more sustainable options, so those should be higher up on the hierarchy as well. And when we design our streets, we should look at our complete streets policy, and we should take those modes that are prioritized and prioritize them in our street design. So that's sort of the main thrust of a complete streets policy. That would have been a great place to start the conversation. And then, you know, no, I lost my train of thought. Dan, why don't you go?
Hi, Alyssa. My comments are just some additions to the redlined version of the thing that you have on the limbs. So I'm not sure if it's appropriate now or if you want to take those later.
Yeah, so I will say a couple of my key takeaways. So to be clear, the committee did not make any of the red lines. That was something that staff, the project lead, the city staff did. The committee basically provided input, and then they came back with the red line changes. So we definitely can suggest specific line edit type changes. Up to this point, the committee of folks has not been doing that. I will say my bigger takeaways, so the existing complete streets, right? The complete streets policy that we have has been in place since 2016, and it has always said that people walking should be a priority, and then people biking, and then people taking transit, and then people driving. And even with that policy in place, we've seen a lot of practices that force those modes into conflict while minimizing impacts on vehicles and minimizing impacts on parking, right? And so I think, you know, a lot of the conversation from the folks thinking about that sustainable walk, bike, transit lens was really focused on the fact that the policy as a whole needs to be tighter. It needs to be airtight as opposed to kind of leaky. There's a lot of language in there that allows for, well, as long as we document the trade-offs, then the trade-offs are okay, right? It creates a lot of holes that will continue to potentially support that practice of pitting people walking against people biking or transit against sidewalks or whatever it is. You know, it continues to say we're going to prioritize all modes, which is kind of empty language, right? If everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. There's a lot of car-focused language in the update. For example, the definition of a complete street doesn't at all resemble what I just shared. The definition of a complete streets is about mitigating the speed of cars, right? So it's still centered on the car experience as opposed to people walking, biking, using transit. And it doesn't explicitly say that we need to reduce space for cars, right? It has some of the positive language about we need to make sure there's a good experience for walking and biking and transit, but it doesn't say how we do that. And then so, you know, again, kind of going back to the patterns that we've seen where we have conflict between walking, biking, and transit, and we mitigate impacts on cars, that's concerning. So those are just like a couple high level examples of what I'm seeing in the guidance. I'm happy to go into detail on any of those or like suggestions that I would have in terms of what our committee might want to focus on. But I also just want to encourage folks to take a look at that document. It's a long document. Like I said, it's like 4 pages. I think it's 5 or 6 with all the red lines in them because you're, you know, seeing all the old text and all the new text. And yeah, we have a little bit of time. The next committee meeting is going to be happening at the very end of June. So I think, I don't know if Matthew Deardahl would have thoughts about whether or not we should comment on that in June, or if we have space to comment on it in July. But it's a very, there's a lot of little changes, and they just sort of all add up to the big things that I shared. But I want folks to have enough time to like look through it on their own as well. Matthew, did you have any thoughts on timing? Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Bree.
My thought on timing is like, you know, the end of June, there'll be a committee meeting, and then after that, there'll be the PAC subcommittee to full committee cycle. And I think that's an appropriate time to formalize comments, in my opinion.
Great, thank you. So I think like today can be more of an open-ended discussion. If folks would like more insight into some of the conversations that the work group has been having on the Complete Streets policy, if folks have specific questions about some of the line items, I think we can talk about that. But wanted to, because it's a longer document and it's a big deal, right? We have in many of our resolutions over the last number of years pointed to the Complete Streets policy and said, city, people walking and biking are at the top of this hierarchy. We need you to pay attention to that. And so this is like one of those policies that I think we rely on and we point the city to often. And so it would be really important for us to make it the best we can be and not have it be a step backwards. So Bree, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, Complete Streets, kind of like how Phil was saying, it's a tricky thing, right? Like, it was put in place in 2016, and you know, they added a couple of things to the upside down pyramid, but it's not like our city prioritizes those folks at the top yet. So again, it's like, oh, it's a great graphic, but don't get distracted by that. And I'm glad, Alyssa, you're advocating for the image says. But yeah, I just know other cities have used Complete Streets to just make roads bigger. And yeah, it's just a tricky thing. So I'm glad that there's some nuance and we have time to dig into it. I'm glad that there's a longer time one.
I don't see any other hands raised. Dan Miller, did you have any comments that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I can do a few here. On page 5, first sentence, the city will continue to engage partner agencies, schools, businesses, neighborhood associations, and developers in a cooperative manner. I think 2 groups are missing there. One would be interest groups and the general public. And you could wordsmith that, or I can help you out depending on it. But I think those are 2 groups that have made Bryant a success by basically going to the general public and into interest groups, and that's not spelled out here. And I think it's worth the addition. Moving on down, these are short basically. On page 6, the second paragraph starts with, during the planning phase, city staff will work with other city departments, external agencies, city advisory committees, and elected officials as necessary. I think after external agencies, I would like to see municipalities. Now this, this came up last week with 37th Avenue, but there are sections of the city that are cross jurisdictions with municipalities. Definitely Northeast has 2 of them between St. Anthony, which affects the missing link, the Grand Rounds missing link, and 37th is another example. So I think that's worth some consideration. And then just moving on down. On page 7, underneath, it's a crossed out number 4 exemptions. And underneath the bullet points, you have one about pedestrian and bicycle winter maintenance study. I think this might be a place to include something to the effect of an all ages and abilities PCI index rating maintenance and renovation plans similar to asphalt repaving, something that we've talked about here in the past, and maybe there'd be something to include here. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. I'm glad it sounds like you got a chance to really look at this beforehand, and I think those are great updates. I would say at this point, I also can sort of collect comments and bring those to those, think about how to bring those into that discussion at the end of the month. So we can both, think about what do we want to say as a committee, but then, part of my role, because I'm the Bicycle Advisory Committee representative, is to bring your comments to that discussion. So if you all have additional thoughts or comments, either in this meeting or before the end of the month, I would be more than happy to connect with you on those, so that I can kind of think about how we bring those into that discussion. Obviously, the meetings are an hour and there are like 25 people in that conversation, and so I can't necessarily bring forward everything, but it will, kind of help me think about how I prioritize things and what I might be able to communicate to the project manager over email and such. So thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. Dan and Bree, you both still have your hands up, and I don't know if that means you have more comments or you just haven't put them down.
Alyssa, would that be helpful for me to send you an email with that stuff that I just said?
If you already have it written out, that's great. I did take some notes, but if you have something that's already written out, that would.
I'll follow it up with you, just to make it easier.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Phil, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'll send you language on the emergency vehicles. I just reread it, and again, I was just really surprised. But also just a question for you. So living streets, why continue to use complete streets? I mean, what I see in other cities around Minnesota is that living streets is embraced as and it is a bigger concept as is being acknowledged with the green infrastructure piece. So why has the committee to the state wanted to continue to use complete streets? I mean, I'm not picky about names, but and also around the country, I guess I'm seeing more refined work using the concept of living streets. So why has the committee stuck with complete streets?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't know that I'm gonna have a good answer for you. At this point, I would say it hasn't come up, right? Like that's a concept I wasn't aware of, and not something that was part of the discussion, right? It was really focused on the content of the policy rather than, and really focused on bringing, like I said, those two elements of freight and green infrastructure into the existing policy. It wasn't, the discussion wasn't sort of queued up as like, let's really rethink this policy, right? Like, let's really go back to the, there's some like phrase of like, take it down to the studs or whatever. Think about what is the goal and the purpose of this policy, and then rewrite, implement a policy that aligns with those goals. It was really about line editing the existing policy and bringing in those outside elements. And so I think in some ways the nature of the conversation and how staff were sort of framing it for us would not have naturally pushed a conversation in that direction. I don't know. I'm going to put Matthew Deardahl on the spot a little bit and ask if there's been any because I know there's been a lot of work. We had sort of meeting 1 in October, meeting 2 in January. We're supposed to have another meeting in February, and then the last one didn't happen until end of April, beginning of May, just not that long ago. And so there's also, I know, been a lot of internal conversation, and I don't know if it's touched on that or not.
Sorry, I was Googling the difference between complete streets and living streets. Did you ask me to explain that?
No, I asked if, I basically said, we haven't discussed that in the committee meetings I've been a part of, and I'm curious if it's come up in the internal conversations in that like multi-month gap where there weren't any conversations that were the work group.
Right, no, it hasn't come up from my perspective either.
Well, I can send the sort of the links. I mean, the first policy in Minnesota was North St. Paul, but I can send that stuff, and then the fire chiefs work on fire trucks. I can send all that background best practices to you, Alyssa.
So just real quick on complete versus living, I am kind of verifying my understanding, because I think complete streets is, I think, much broader than just reconstruction. And so it's like it should be a process and a prioritization and like kind of like how we should go about all the things from like planning, design, construction, operations, maintenance, and things like that. And I could be wrong, but I think living streets is much more specifically like a less definition sort of Wooner, shared street concept where all the things are together and there is no priority and things like that. And like to me that I think living streets is more of a very specific street type rather than a broad philosophy. Again, I could be wrong. I think it's probably best just to stick with we haven't thought of living streets specifically, but that's my best guess in the little bit that I've thought about it.
Well, at least it's been defined in the cities that I know in Minnesota,
Sure.
but North St. Paul, it actually is complete streets, which is both a process and a sort of a physical design kind of rubric, adding the green infrastructure that and adding the and they sort of adding the use of curb space in terms of looking at retail sales per square foot, looking at community crime prevention through environmental design. It's at least as it's been defined, and it was a watershed district that worked with the city and the definition I see it as. But again, this is where I'm not that picky about, because we're adding green infrastructure very explicitly, which is good. But I see living streets as a broader term that encompasses complete streets, but it includes more. Let's put it that way.
Okay, cool.
But I'll send links.
I mean, I think complete streets, that's where it kind of gets iffy, right? Like, if I didn't know about complete streets and I saw that, I'm like, okay, a complete street encompasses all of those modes. And around the nation, that's like what some cities have done. There's like, oh, we need complete streets. We're going to make this a ginormous street that no one can cross, but it's going to have a crosswalk and bike lanes and 4-lane traffic. So
that could be a problem.
Right. So yeah, I'm glad we're having this discussion now and looking through it now. Yeah, there's things to work on.
Bree, I don't know if there was one more agenda item from Matthew or if you already went through that, but I want to make sure, since we're going to put this on I wasn't sure if I got pushed last to the agenda or if I got pushed third. But what?
I do have an item. Oh, okay.
He does have one.
So I would say thanks for giving me some space to sort of introduce the concept, and also thank you all for your patience and sort of my non-linear. I didn't quite start that in the right place, so some things for me to think about for next time. Please take a look at the policies if you have time and interest, and let me know your thoughts. Thanks, Phil and Dan, for taking a look at those before the meeting and providing some thoughts. Like I said, the next meeting is at the very end of June, and then we'll probably, sounds like, talk about this at the next 5Es meeting again, and maybe come up with some key points that we want to communicate as a committee. And I will try to kind of collect what I've heard up to that point, and we can work on it in the meeting. So. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Okay, Matthew.
All right. So I brought up at the full committee meeting last month, I'll just recap that we are being asked to take a look at, okay, let's start over. The clerk's office has asked us to define membership for each of our subcommittees. That is a subset of the full membership that we currently use. Okay, so right now, our full committee, we have an official quorum. What's that number, Milson or Chris? Like
14.
18, 14. So the quorum is 14, and our membership is just fully listed, and that's just how it's always been done forever. And the clerk's office, in their attempt to standardize a lot of the subcommittees or the boards and commissions, would like us to define a subset of the membership. And so their thought is that the subcommittee can't be the full membership. And so we've always approached it a little more informally. And so I think the task that we need to try to accomplish by the full committee in June is to identify those members. And so to get like specific, I think a number close to like 5 or 7 feels right. And there are some implications. So if we have a 5-member subcommittee, that means the quorum is 3. And so those, at least 3 of those specific 5 people need to show up in order for us to have quorum for subcommittee and to be able to hold the meeting. That number could be 7, it could be any number that is a subset of the full committee. So does anybody have any questions about that? I feel like I'm not sure if I gave the best. Chris Milson, do you have anything to add to help clarify? And then let's see if there's questions.
Well, I guess just only that other folks can still attend and take part in those meetings. If we were to vote on anything at those meetings, then it would only be the membership, but we don't really do votes at the subcommittees.
Right.
So that's maybe the only other piece.
I saw Wes hand up and then down.
Chris answered my question.
Gotcha.
I was just going to ask, like, what other actions would this affect, or that kind of thing. So voting.
Okay. Yeah. Alyssa.
Sorry, did I miss? Did you give timeline as to when this is being implemented?
Well, we want yesterday, right? So like the clerk's office wants us to. I think there's some pressure to make this happen. So it's my goal to see if we could figure this out by the full committee in the June this month.
Okay.
And so I'm looking for, I think one thing we could do is like, we could send out an email sort of outlining what the task is and like why we're doing it in context, and see if we can we'll also pull some data to find out, who might be good candidates for it based on previous attendance, so if there's regulars, and then basically try to approach the full committee meeting with a sense of what the number we want is and the specific names.
And one other thing that I'll add is that we'll probably want to do some sort of like process thing for this as well, in terms of like if you're on that list and you can't make it, letting us know in advance to the best of your ability, just because ultimately if we had to cancel a meeting and presenters are coming and all that sort of stuff, so we'll just need to think through what that looks like, if it's just an email the day before or how to kind of check in on that. More process.
Let's just go free flow at this point. So Alyssa, go ahead.
One thing I just want to add is right now, this doesn't necessitate, but it would be good for us to update the bylaws. Right now, we updated our bylaws last December before new members came on. It is very explicit in like saying you are expected but not required to attend a subcommittee, right? And so I will want to think about if it's necessary to change the bylaws, or if we just want to like take a look at them. So that's just something that the exec team can bring forth depending on how we land on this.
I agree. That's a good observation. Any other thoughts? Does the approach of staff maybe sending out an email with some context and explanation, and we can pull the attendance and maybe check with some folks? I mean, it kind of, I think there is an easy answer to this. Like the co-chairs of the subcommittees are an obvious 2, I'm looking at some of the names that, I just regularly see at all of them. So I think we can get there. It's just a matter of like wanting to make sure that the 5 people that we pick like sort of know, understand, and like feel comfortable with that, because there is a little bit of an added attendance pressure. So.
And then I'll bring up the bylaws again. We have a clear process for like, if you're resigning from the committee, right? You have to like email the chair and notify staff, and then that sets things rolling. So if people are not able to attend regularly or their schedules change, I would also want some clarity about like if someone is on the roster and they can't attend regularly and they decide they need to step off, what's the turnaround for quorum, like, and how they do that. So I want to. And then how do we like add new folks? Like how do we make changes basically?
Right. And we have that on our list to get clarity on for sure. So.
Yeah, I mean, just be really clear for folks when they sign up, they're committing to attending hopefully 99% of
right.
meetings. So, and do you need a quorum throughout the entire meeting? I know that we added a 30 minutes to this meeting, and so a handful of people like have to drop off at 5:30.
I don't think so. I think it's when it starts.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
So then you do roll call, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, although to be picky using Robert's rules, if anyone can call for a quorum call at any time during a meeting, and if quorum has failed, then you can't conduct legal business going forward. Who's going to do that? Right? Who cares?
Well, right. And I still think we're going to try to maintain the informal nature of the subcommittee. So I'm hoping that doesn't change in this, because like we already like don't pass formal resolutions. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, good.
Yeah. But yeah, good point.
Anything legally binding in the subcommittee. We're just bringing things to the full committee.
Right. Even we used to vote sometimes, and even that was seen as like forwarding the recommended resolution to the full committee, and it could still be changed and all that, so yeah. Okay. Well, Chris and Millicent, why don't we huddle up and figure out our game plan for the email, and getting all those details sorted out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And reminder, do the doodle poll. It'll be fun. Bike ride downtown. And I'm gonna
excited.
Somewhere so that we can like congregate distance space wise.
Yeah.
So anything else anybody wants to add? Cool. Enjoy the weather. Good luck when it's 96.
Hang on. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone.